There is this really persistent myth in the world of productivity.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, in the tech world, too. It's this idea that if you can just find the one perfect system, everything will magically fall into place.
Right. The whole silver bullet fallacy.
Exactly. You
Right.
know the feeling, right? If you just buy that right planner, or if you download that perfect new app, the absolute chaos of your life will suddenly turn into this beautiful, organized grid.
It's incredibly common. I mean, we all want a single tool to solve a complex, multifaceted problem.
We do, but nowhere is that myth more expensive or honestly more disastrous than in cloud computing.
Oh, without a doubt.
So today we are doing a deep dive into a piece that tackles this head on. It's an article from techreader.blog by Aaron Rose.
Titled The Secret Life of Azure, the notebook that could grow forever.
Yes. And what I really appreciate about this piece is that Ritty takes something that is usually incredibly dry.
Data architecture.
Yeah, data architecture, and he turns it into a character study.
He really does. He argues that the way we store data isn't just about code, it's really about philosophy.
Right.
It's about how you view the world. Do you view it as a rigid set of rules or a chaotic stream of events?
And to explore that, he introduces us to a protagonist named Timothy.
Poor Timothy.
Yeah, Timothy is a librarian, but he is definitely not having a quiet afternoon reading in the stacks.
Not at all.
The text describes him sitting behind a mountain of loose-leaf papers, looking completely defeated.
He is essentially a stand-in for every database administrator or back-end engineer who has ever lived.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Because the library has installed this new automated assembly line, and it is just dumping thousands of new records onto his desk every single hour.
Thousands an hour.
And Timothy is paralyzed. He's just trying to figure out where to put them all.
Because he tried a ledger, but he says it was too stiff.
Right, and then he tried loose piles, but they were too messy.
He's looking for a magical notebook that just organizes itself.
Which doesn't exist. And that search, that specific crisis Timothy is having, is the perfect lens to understand the battle between the two giants of the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem.
Azure SQL and Azure Cosmos DB.
Exactly. So that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to use Timothy's breakdown to decode the fundamental difference between relational databases and NoSQL databases.
Because it turns out choosing between them isn't just about picking a database software.
No, it's a choice between structure and scale.
It really is. And it starts with the data itself. In this story, Timothy complains to his mentor, Margaret, about the actual shape of the stuff coming in.
The variable data problem.
Right. He tells her some entries are just names, others are photos, others are 3-page descriptions.
It's totally unpredictable.
It is. Think about a guest book at a wedding. Most people just sign their name and maybe write congrats.
Sure.
But then you have that one aunt who tapes in a Polaroid picture and writes a massive poem in the margins.
Yeah, totally ruins the formatting.
Exactly. If your guest book is a strict Excel spreadsheet, that poem breaks the whole system. You literally cannot put a poem in a cell meant for a zip code.
And that is exactly where Margaret comes in. She is the wise architect in the story. She sees Timothy absolutely drowning, and she doesn't hand him a software manual.
Which wouldn't help anyway.
Right. She hands him 2 physical objects, a strictly lined ledger, and a flexible, expandable binder.
This is the core metaphor of the whole piece. Margaret tells him, in the cloud, we don't just have one kind of notebook.
She forces him to look at the nature of the information before he picks the container.
Yes. So let's look at the first object she pulls out, the ledger.
She draws a rigid grid on a chalkboard, and this represents Azure SQL.
Correct. This represents the relational database. It is the spreadsheet model. It has columns, it has rows, and most importantly, it has rules.
Strict rules. Margaret calls it the gold standard for when you know exactly what your data looks like. Name, date, ID number.
The technical term here is a schema. A schema is basically a contract. You are telling the database, I promise that every time I give you a new entry, it will have a date in column A and a dollar amount in column B.
And the database holds you to that promise.
Ruthlessly.
Yeah.
If you try to shove a photo into the dollar amount column, Azure SQL would just reject it. It throws an error. It protects the integrity of the data above all else.
Which sounds great for things like, say, the library's payroll.
Exactly. If you are handling money or inventory counts or social security numbers, you want that rigidity.
You need it to be exact.
You do. You want to know that when you query column B, you are getting a number, not a picture of a cat. That consistency is why relational databases have run the world for 40 years.
But here is the catch, right? Timothy looks at this beautiful, rigid grid, and he asks the question that haunts pretty much every modern startup.
What if the data changes?
Yeah. What if tomorrow I want to record a patron's favorite color?
And Margaret has to give him the bad news. In a rigid ledger, you can't just scribble in the margins. You have to rewrite the ledger's rules.
You have to change the schema.
Right. In the tech world, this is called a migration.
And migrations are terrifying.
They can be. If you have a table with 1 billion rows and you suddenly decide you need a new column for favorite color, you have to modify the structure of the entire database.
Which takes time.
It is slow, it is risky, and it often requires downtime.
It's like trying to add a new floor to a skyscraper after it's already built and occupied. You can do it, but it is going to be a complete construction nightmare.
That is a great analogy. Azure SQL, the whole relational model, it just doesn't like surprises. It wants the world to be predictable.
But the real world isn't predictable. The data coming into Timothy's library, the photos, the random descriptions, it is messy.
Very messy.
So Margaret moves to the second drawing. She sketches flexible bubbles.
Enter Azure Cosmos DB. This is the infinite binder.
This is the NoSQL approach. And NoSQL basically means not only SQL, or more practically, no rigid schema.
Precisely. In Cosmos DB, data isn't stored in rows and tables. It is stored as documents. Think of a document like a single sheet of paper in that binder.
And the magic is that every sheet can be completely different.
Completely different. One sheet can just have a name, Timothy. The very next sheet can have a name, a bio, a list of 5 books, and a JPEG of a library card.
And Cosmos DB just accepts it.
It doesn't care.
Yeah.
It accepts the data exactly as it is.
So you don't have to define the columns beforehand at all.
No. This is often called schema on read. You just throw the data in. The write happens instantly.
Wow.
You figure out how to organize it later when you read it back out. It is incredibly fast because the database isn't stopping to check your contract every single time you save something.
So that completely solves Timothy's messy data problem. He doesn't have to force the photo into a text box. He just throws it in the binder.
Exactly.
But the article brings up a second point about Cosmos DB that I found even more fascinating. It isn't just about the messiness. It is about the geography.
The planet scale aspect. This is where the cloud really differentiates itself from just a server sitting in a basement somewhere.
Right, because Timothy has this realization. He asks, what if the London branch and the Tokyo branch need to write to the notebook at the exact same time?
This is the classic concurrency problem.
Yeah.
If you have one physical ledger, one Azure SQL database,
Yeah.
it usually lives in one physical place, say New York.
Okay.
If someone in Tokyo wants to write to it, their signal has to travel all the way across the globe to New York, wait in line, write the entry, and travel all the way back.
And that is latency. That's the lag we all hate.
Exactly. It might only be half a second, but in modern computing, half a second is an eternity.
People click away in half a second.
They absolutely do. But Margaret explains that the infinite binder, Cosmos DB, doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It replicates.
She mentions millisecond latency anywhere in the world.
Because Cosmos DB is designed from the ground up to be distributed.
Yeah.
You can have a copy of your binder in London, Tokyo, New York, and Sydney.
All at the same time.
Yes. So when the user in Tokyo writes a review, they are writing to the Tokyo copy. It is instant.
Oh, I see.
And then, in the background, the system automatically syncs that change to all the other binders across the world.
So if Azure SQL is the master of structure and rules, Cosmos DB is the master of speed and reach.
That is the trade-off. With Cosmos, you get incredible speed and flexibility, but you give up that strict bank vault consistency of the ledger.
Because there might be a delay.
Right. You might have a split second where the Tokyo binder and the New York binder are slightly different before they sync up.
Which brings us to the showdown. Timothy is sitting there looking at these two options, the rigid ledger and the infinite binder. And he asks the million-dollar question. Exactly. And Margaret gives him a decision matrix. It's not about which one is better technology.
No, it's about what the application actually needs.
She uses some really practical examples. She tells him, if you are managing the library's payroll and fines, use Azure SQL.
Because for payroll, you don't care about millisecond latency in Tokyo.
You're not at all.
You care about accuracy. You need those columns to balance perfectly to the penny. You need the schema to enforce the rules so no one accidentally gets paid $0 because of a typo.
But then she says, if you are managing a global social feed of what patrons are reading, use Cosmos DB.
Right. Think about a Twitter or Instagram feed. If a user posts a review and it takes 3 milliseconds for it to show up for someone else, that is fine.
Nobody notices.
Exactly. If one user posts a video and another posts text, that is fine too. What matters is that the app feels fast and works everywhere. You need a database that can swallow all that variance without complaining.
There is a technical nuance here that Aaron Rose dives into in the key concepts section of the article. He talks about how these things grow.
The scaling mechanics.
Yeah, we touched on vertical versus horizontal scaling a bit earlier, but I want to really unpack that because it sounds like jargon, but the metaphor explains it so well.
It is absolutely vital for understanding the cost and capability of these systems.
So vertical scaling, that is the Azure SQL method, right?
Correct.
Ledger.
Correct. Imagine your ledger is getting full, or the accountant is too slow because there are just too many transactions happening.
Okay.
Vertical scaling is like buying a faster calculator, or hiring a smarter accountant who can write twice as fast.
You are beefing up the single machine.
Yes. You add more RAM, more CPU to the one server running the database. You make the beast bigger.
But there has to be a limit to that.
There is. Eventually, you hit a ceiling. You literally cannot buy a faster processor.
Right.
It also gets incredibly expensive to buy the biggest supercomputer on the market just to run one database.
And that is where horizontal scaling comes in, the Cosmos DB way.
Right. Horizontal scaling means getting wider. Instead of buying a faster calculator, you just hire more accountants.
I love that.
In the binder metaphor, when the binder gets full, you don't commission a giant, heavy custom binder.
Yeah.
You just buy a second normal binder.
Then a third.
Exactly.
You just put them side by side on the shelf.
Yes. And because the data in Cosmos is flexible and distributed anyway, it is very easy to chop it up and spread it across 1,000 servers.
So if you need to handle twice as much traffic, you just double the number of servers.
And theoretically, you can do that forever. That is why they call it the notebook. They could grow forever.
It really clarifies why giants like Walmart or FedEx use this for their tracking systems. They need that infinite width. They can't rely on one single supercomputer to track every package in the world.
But, and here's the real twist in the story, Timothy doesn't just pick the shiny new infinite binder.
No, he doesn't. And I think this is the most important part of the entire article. He is sitting there with his mountain of papers and he starts sorting them into two piles.
More man.
He realizes, I don't need one giant notebook. I need the right tool for the right record.
That is the maturity moment in data architecture. We call this polyglot persistence.
Polyglot persistence.
It is a fancy term, but it just means using different languages, or in this case, databases, for different parts of your application.
So he realizes he can have a ledger for the important numbers, the payroll, the fines, and an infinite binder for the messy global ideas.
Margaret validates this beautifully in the text. She tells him, in the cloud, data isn't just something you keep, it's something you architect.
That line stopped me in my tracks. It's something you architect.
It completely changes the role of the user. You aren't just a passive storage manager anymore. You are designing a system.
Right.
Margaret says when you do this correctly, the library stops being a warehouse and starts being an engine.
I really love that distinction, a warehouse versus an engine.
A warehouse is static. It is where data goes to die, or at least to sit and gather dust until an audit happens.
Yeah.
But an engine.
Yeah.
An engine drives the business forward.
Because if you put your social feed data into a rigid ledger, your engine seizes up. It is too slow, it is clunky. You spend all your time rewriting rules instead of serving customers.
And if you put your payroll data into a messy binder, your engine becomes unreliable. You might pay people the wrong amount because you didn't enforce the basic rules.
But if you architect it, putting the high-speed fuel in the Cosmos tank and the high-stability oil in the SQL tank, the whole car just flies.
It really creates a mental shift. It is not about Azure SQL being old school or Cosmos DB being modern.
It is about fit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is about respecting the data. What does the data want to be? Does it want to be strictly defined, or does it want to flow freely?
Before we wrap up, I want to quickly recap those key concepts one more time, just to make sure they really stick for anyone listening who might be making this choice in their own work.
Sure. So first we have Azure SQL. This is your relational database. Think tables, rows, and schemas.
It scales vertically by getting bigger, and it is best for structured, consistent data where absolute accuracy is more important than raw speed or flexibility.
Then we have Azure Cosmos DB. This is your NoSQL database. Think documents, flexible, and global.
It scales horizontally by getting wider, and it is best for unstructured data, massive volume, and things that need to be instantly available everywhere.
And the winner is
Both.
Both. The diplomatic answer, but the correct one.
Oh. It is funny, looking back at the intro of the source, Timothy was so stressed because he thought he had to find the solution. the singular solution.
We all do that. We want the super app that manages our calendar, our finances, our notes, and our groceries.
But usually those apps are mediocre at everything.
They really are.
I was actually thinking about my own digital life while reading this. I have spreadsheets for my budget. That is my Azure SQL. Every row is a dollar amount. It has to balance perfectly.
You don't want eventual consistency in your bank account. You want to know exactly how much money you have right now.
Exactly. Then I have my Notes app or my Photos app. That is pure Cosmos DB. It is a total stream of consciousness.
Right.
I have a grocery list next to a book recommendation, next to a blurry photo of a sunset.
And if you tried to force your Notes app into a spreadsheet,
I would go crazy. I would have to create a column for sunset quality just to save a photo. It makes no sense.
and conversely, if you tried to run your monthly budget in a blank notebook with no columns, you would definitely make math errors. The structure saves you.
So the lesson from Margaret applies to us personally, too, not just to cloud architects. We need to architect our own information. Use the ledger for the strict stuff. Use the binder for the messy stuff.
And recognize that the messy stuff isn't bad. That is usually where the creativity happens. It just requires a different container.
I think that is a perfect place to land. Timothy started this journey completely drowning in paper, and he ended it not by throwing the paper away, but by building a better system to hold it.
He stopped fighting the chaos and started managing it.
So here's a question for everyone listening. Where are you pulling a Timothy in your own work or life? Are you trying to force a flexible, creative, messy idea into a rigid, structured box?
Or are you trying to manage something that needs strict discipline, like your project timelines or your finances, in a chaotic infinite binder?
Maybe the stress isn't coming from the workload itself. Maybe you are just using the wrong notebook.
Go find your Margaret. Or better yet, be your own architect.
That is it for this deep dive into the secret life of Azure. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Keep architecting.
See you next time.